Hey, what's going on? Ryan Kohler here from Talent Alchemy and GPT for Work. And this video unpacks kind of the business revolution that's coming over the next, 1 to 5 years because of generative AI and what it's going to do to change the way organizations approach doing all different parts of their jobs and their processes, whether it's talent and their talent engine, whether it's their customer engine from sales to marketing to success to support, or whether it's even their team engine that administration and analysis and management, etc. There's very few parts of business that are not going to be impacted one way or another by generative AI. Look, this isn't a new thing, although AI has been around for a while. It's gained a lot of popularity recently, but this concept of evolution and applying technology to improve and iterate the way that you get things done has been around forever. In fact, that's the way I built Applicant Pro to 10 times 11 years in a row on the Inc. 5000 list, and bootstrapping to that level of growth was a constant cycle of iteration of looking at projects, looking at processes, unpacking how I thought we could improve it, testing it in a very agile way so that we could get the best gains in the shortest amount of time with the least amount of risk that allowed us to basically out execute the big giant well-funded public companies that we were competing against. But if you hear about ChatGPT these days in the news or among your team or in your industry or wherever you go, you're going to hear a lot of stories and concerns and hype and you name it on all sides of the spectrum about how it will change everything. It's going to automate everything. It's going to make it so that you can run $1 billion company with 2 people, or that it's going to ruin the world and destroy us all, and whatever the case may be. Now, the first part of understanding how to prepare your business for this and how to step into the world of generative AI is to understand why there's so much conflicting information out there. And it really comes down to this concept of a hype cycle. We follow this hype cycle, or this hype cycle happens just by default. There's no fighting it. It will happen anytime that there is a major, potentially transformative technology brought into the world and especially into the workplace. Whether that's the internet, whether it's email, whether it's fax machines, whether it's even the phone, you name it. This has always happened. It happened with the iPhone, with the iPad, with blockchain, and now we're seeing it happen with generative AI, and it will happen with new future, technology enhancements that come out. The fact of the matter is, though, is you have to understand why it happens this way. And so, effectively, most technology breakthroughs are designed by really smart, geeky people, right? Whether it's a programmer, an engineer, an inventor, a scientist, you name it, it's designed by people who just love researching and figuring out how that stuff works. They're most likely funded out of just sheer love for it, or a university or a nonprofit or the government, whatever the case may be. But at some point, they have to start scaling, and that requires money. And in order to go from it's a science experiment to we're actually going to scale and figure out how this becomes a business or a product or a piece of technology, we need cash. And that normally has to do with raising venture capital or investment capital of some point and bringing on or attracting great talent to your team. Unfortunately, to do that, that requires talking about all the potential ways that this will change the world and how quickly it's going to change. That hype or that excitement or that is honestly just an extension of the passion of the people working on it. They're not saying it will do all of these things. They're saying it could do all of these things. And it's our job as startup founders, as scientists, or whatever the case may be, to figure out what things it will do, what things it won't do, and how to make it do as many things as possible that are valuable and important and will help businesses out there. Now, at some point, we reach the pinnacle where we've overhyped and we start to see that it won't do all those things, or it won't do them as well as we thought they would, or it won't do them as fast as we would. And we start to get a lot of this negativity, all of this, like our expectations of both what it could do, how well it would do it, and how quickly it would do it were overinflated, when it clearly, like all new technology, doesn't happen the way we thought it would or as fast as we thought it would. People start to get disillusioned. You start to see examples of, well, it didn't do that. Well, you were wrong when you said it would do that. You could think about that for every single person, right? I mean, Columbus told his people the hype was he was going to find a new way to India. Instead, he ran into a new land. He didn't deliver on the hype he gave, but it did end up being something very positive. And so in that same way, where we end up at some point is in the valid solutions, the tried and tested and validated things that add value, etc., where we've nailed it down, that we end up out here on the right hand side. You could say that we're there with the iPhone, we're there with the iPad, we're definitely there with the internet, but we aren't there with, say, blockchain or with NFTs or with generative AI. And you can kind of see, depending on the type of AI, the project it's working on, the industry you're in, the problem they're trying to solve, where they're at along this cycle. Now, the first step of this is to figure out, we now know where the hype comes from. And so as people are hyping these things, it's a good way to be able to say, okay, people who hype it's because they have the most to gain. The way to cut through the hype or identify how hyped it is would be to say, hey, how likely do you think this is to happen? How likely do you think it is to be as good as you're predicting? And how likely is it to happen in that time frame? And when you start to say that, get those probabilities, it starts to give you some level of feel of the hype, right? It doesn't mean it will never happen. It doesn't mean that it won't happen at all or that it won't happen the way they say it. But we're trying to make sure that we know we're not focused on the biggest hype things. We're focused on the more pragmatic things. Number two, when you're getting hate, when people are saying it'll end the world, it's not going to work, it's not working at all, once again, those who stand to lose the most, meaning somebody that it's replacing their job, it's attacking their industry, it's going to potentially harm their business model, they're going to have to change to survive, are the ones to cling on to the status quo. Once again, you need to know where the hype and where the hate is coming from. Your job as a business owner, business manager, business executive, employee is to find the pragmatic path to go through the storm, not believing too much hate, not believing too much hype, but just, kind of you're looking for the, oh, that's just right porridge bowl, right? And so the way that we look at it is we need to figure out how will it impact our business, our market share, meaning competition, our industry, our own job. We need to ask ourselves, how likely is the hype to come true? How likely is the hate to be real? How can we mitigate some of the downsides? How can we maximize the upsides, etc.? This is fundamental to understanding any type of technology. So we reach this point and we say, well, what should we do as the average business, as the average executive, as the average employee? What should we do today? A lot of people are saying, well, I'll just wait and see. And I can tell you, waiting and seeing is not the approach. Not personally, not professionally, not business-wise. You're not going to be where you need to be in the future by waiting. You're definitely going to get beat to the rewards if you wait around or put your head in the sand. You also aren't going to be able to see your way through the hype and the hate if you're not spending time actually improving your ability. So how do you attack it? Well, it's really simple. Two main parts. Number one, we take all the different things we hear and we put them on this risk and reward spectrum. Whether this is hype or hate, we take and we plot it. Hey, for our business, for what's being talked about, how likely is this to have, how big is the reward and how big is the risk? What we want to do is focus on what we'd call the low-hanging fruit, meaning the stuff in the green, not the stuff in the red. It doesn't mean we'll never get to those projects or those ideas. We're just not going to start with them. Now, on the flip side, we have the how easy would it be and how likely is it to get the impact we're thinking. Once again, we don't want to do hard things with low likelihood of impact. We want to do easy things with the highest likelihood of impact. Our goal is to pick the projects each time that we go and prioritize that are green. Another way to think about it would be when you think about the hype and the hate, when you think about the risks of using, you can kind of boil it down to these two core areas. Number one on the left would be how private, how secret, how proprietary is the information that we're loading up into it. Effectively, you're saying how nasty would it be if the information got out there into the public. The less nasty it is, the better it is to start there. Give you a good example would be the difference between uploading your proprietary mixture for your formula for your product versus uploading your current approach to product development and how you could go about improving your approach. Those are two different things. Both of them you may say is something that's not public, but one of them is super secret and very nasty if it got out there, and the other one is probably more standardized and best practice in the industry, meaning it's probably already out there. And so we want to start with the stuff with the lowest temperature. Now on the flip side, we have the how important is accuracy or how widespread will be the distribution of it. Now this is resolved in a different way. The risk of something being inaccurate is that we can get over it by just reading it, by proofreading it. Effectively what we're saying is if it's that private, if it's that secret, if it's that proprietary, if it's something that you would only tell somebody who signed an NDA or that you have attorney-client privilege with, then it probably doesn't belong being loaded up into ChatGPT or literally any generative AI today. Just like you wouldn't go and give it to a random stranger or talk to it about somebody who called you up on the phone. On the flip side, the accuracy and distribution is very simple. If you can't proofread it and know whether it's right or wrong, then you shouldn't be relying on what's coming out of ChatGPT as a final draft. You would assume that it's a beginning draft. And so once again, going back to that legal thing, if you would go to a lawyer about it and you're expecting legal solid advice that's accurate, well, it probably isn't something you'd use ChatGPT for today. On the other hand, if it's something like a blog post, a job ad, a brainstorming a project, unpacking the steps of the project, outlining it, writing responses to emails or email blasts even to your clients or your employees, both of those are most likely things that are either low temperature on both sides or something that you could mitigate the temperature by the way you put the information in. Give you a good example. If I was trying to figure out the targeting of a job ad, if I was trying to come up with recruitment marketing content, the information I'm loading in is not secret or proprietary. And if I'm worried about being at personal information, I can just load in people's resumes or LinkedIn profiles without their contact info. That means the information I'm feeding is now low temperature. Now, on the flip side, how accurate is, well, recruitment marketing content isn't a accurate or inaccurate. It's a, is this what we believe or how we approach, which I'm going to assume you could proofread and validate. You would proofread it if an assistant was writing it for you. And you would give it more proofreading or more editing rounds the wider the distribution it was going to go. Responding to one candidate is different than email blasting 20,000 of them. And so you can see here a pretty easy way to think about this and kind of break it down. The key of actually implementing this throughout your entire company is your policy needs to reflect this same concept. As you're building a policy to spread to use across your organization, it's not just about saying, no, we won't do these things, they're too risky. It's also about ensuring that we say yes to things where we know there's going to be a big reward and low risk, and that we figure out everything in the middle to find a way to make it less risky and higher reward. The way we do this is with an actual program or a process or approach, not just a policy. You see, putting a ChatGPT use policy in place is just the first step. It doesn't check any boxes. It just says, hey, we're going to actually explore ChatGPT, and we believe that there should be some structure, some framework, a foundation in place for how we're going to approach it. Normally, this means you start in that policy by saying, here are things we know we will not do. Here are things we want to do ASAP because we know the benefit is great. And here in the middle, when we don't know, here's how we figure out what to do, how to prioritize it, how to implement and test it out, and how to evolve and figure it out to get it baked into our processes and our approaches. You see, this isn't just important because there's so many pieces to it and your business or your processes are unique compared to everybody else's. It's also important that as you're executing, as you're progressing, as you're evolving your approach and maturing, the way that you use it, generative AI and other technologies are also evolving. And so we need this kind of constant feedback loop to constantly progress and evolve so that we stay up with the changing times because it's worth it, quite simply. So you might at this point stop and go, this sounds like exactly what we want to do, and it sounds like the right approach, but our team doesn't have the expertise to do all of these parts, to identify the risks, or you're worried that while they may have the expertise to figure out some of it, the domain knowledge about your individual company, your individual processes, they don't have the domain knowledge of what's possible, how it could work, and kind of the way to go about it. You don't want to go out there and reinvent the wheel. You don't want to go out there and make all the same mistakes other people have made. So pretty simple about how to move fast with fewer mistakes. We usually see this broken up into three main areas. You have the pirate adventure. Some organizations let their teams run full tilt, do whatever they want. I don't suggest that. Clearly, there are areas that you could identify to say, hey guys, you can go experiment all you want with these certain areas because we know that they're low risk and high reward, right? On the other hand, everything else usually has to do with creating a policy and a plan of attack and running pilot projects to prove and validate that they work. The goal of this is to make sure that we know what we will do and how we're running it. We know what areas are risky, but we're allowing it, or low risk that we're allowing. And we have a process to go about testing, validating, plugging them in, iterating it before we actually make it part of the process. This right here is the way that you move fast, that you ensure that you don't get caught up in the hype. You don't get caught with your head down because of the hate, because you just don't want to do anything or you don't dare do anything, but that you're able to progress and evolve as the market conditions progress and evolve as well. The way that we help is really quite simple. You engage our team very similar to engaging any consultant. We come in and work with you and with your team to brainstorm, to roadmap, to come up with a deep kind of the set policy using templates that can be adjusted and evolve for your given circumstances to put in place your initial policy. At that point, we can now understand what we say no, we don't do, what we say we definitely do, and how we're going to approach prioritizing everything in the middle, making decisions, evolving and executing to get us to results as quickly as possible with the highest reward and the lowest amount of risk. Quite simply, you need expert advice, and that's what we're here to do. And relying on your team to go out and gain that expert advice on their own is simply going to take too long and be too expensive compared to hiring experts to come in and work with your team to help you evolve it. And so that really is the next steps. If you have any questions, we'd be more than happy to hear them. If you'd like to look at a pilot project, that's usually the first step for us of either outlining the policy and coming up with framework so that we know exactly how much work it will take to execute that portion, or to actually fire up a pilot project and run through the entire sequence to prove that ChatGPT will add enough value to make it worth the time invested. That really is the goal with anybody that we work with, is that we know up front that this is going to be worth it. Again, high reward, low risk. We want to make sure that even the risk of wasting time on something is going to be worth it, that it's likely to work, that we're confident it's going to create an impact, and that we're choosing the easiest steps to take one step at a time to constantly prove that it's working, that it's worth it, that there's a return on investment there. So if you'd like to learn more about how we can help you out, if you'd like to schedule a free consultation call, a free brainstorming session, a free unpacking, get access to our policy templates and approaches, etc., feel free to shoot me an email or connect with us. Otherwise, we'll talk to you soon.